The Millstone train station that day was packed with people. Steam rising from the engine filled the air in a white haze, while vendors called out, and the grinding of iron wheels on the tracks mingled with the heavy heat of late summer. Everyone was in a rush to find their way home until a woman stepped down from the last car. Naomi Carter. Her suitcase was old and worn, the heels of her shoes frayed, but her eyes gleamed with hope. She believed that after this long journey, after months of exhausting job hunting, today would mark a new beginning, because in her hands, Naomi held a letter signed by Richard Hale, the wealthiest businessman in the region, who had promised her a nursing job at the clinic he personally funded. Naomi took a deep breath and stepped toward the crowd gathered to welcome Hale at the station gates. He stood there in a sharp suit, smiling at those around him, as Naomi approached confidently and held out the letter. Everything seemed to pause for a moment. Then, the smile vanished from Richard Hale's face. He frowned, looked Naomi up and down, and in front of dozens of Millstone residents, he said coldly, "This town does not need someone like you." The air suddenly grew heavy. A few sneers rang out. Someone whistled. Someone shook their head. Naomi stood still, her hand trembling as it clutched the letter, the only proof of her hope. Her throat tightened, but she fought to keep the tears from falling. The woman who had just arrived, carrying all her dreams of a new beginning, was cruelly rejected right before everyone's eyes. And that moment of shock, right there at Millstone Station, marked the beginning of a dark truth waiting to be uncovered. Naomi Carter was not a nameless drifter. During the war, she had worn the uniform of a military nurse, charging into field hospitals soaked with blood and filled with groans. Hundreds of soldiers had been saved by her quick hands and steadfast heart. Naomi had believed that when the war ended, justice and gratitude would open a worthy path for her, but reality was harsher than ever. Upon returning, Naomi was not welcomed as a hero, but rejected because of the color of her skin. Hospitals denied her job applications. Shops slammed their doors when she walked by. In the end, Naomi scraped together the last of her meager wages, placing all her hopes on Millstone, the place where Richard Hale's letter had given her faith in a new beginning. Richard Hale, the name praised across the town. He stood at the church pulpit every Sunday, preaching charity. He funded schools, nursing homes, and always smiled at those of his own class. But behind that polished exterior, Hale remained a staunch traditionalist, a man who valued money and power above all. To him, people of color would forever be beneath him, fit only for servitude, never as equals. So when Naomi showed up, carrying dreams of holding an official position at the clinic, Hale did not merely refuse. He publicly humiliated her. To him, her presence would only tarnish the reputation he had built. Naomi stood at the station gate that day, with not enough money to return to the city, and no other place to go. The chill in the scornful gazes from the crowd weighed heavily on her heart. All the hope, all the faith she had placed in Millstone, now crumbled to dust. In that moment, Naomi felt more alone than ever before, a black woman with no family, no support, lost in a strange town. And from that very despair, a greater story began to stir. As the mocking laughter around the station still echoed, a calm but firm voice rose above it all. "Mr. Hale, you made a promise in that letter, and now you publicly deny it. That is not the wisdom of a man. It is cowardice." The whole crowd turned around. The one who had spoken was Jonathan Reed, a young lawyer already well established, known for his role in the abolitionist movement. After the war, he had withdrawn to his private farm on the outskirts of Millstone, studying law and managing his fertile land. Not only wealthy, Jonathan was also respected for his intelligence and integrity. His presence shifted the atmosphere. Hale looked momentarily flustered but kept his head high. He knew Jonathan was the only person in town with enough power to truly challenge him. Jonathan said no more. In the silence that followed, he stepped closer to Naomi and held out his hand. "Miss Carter, if Millstone chooses to reject you, then my farm is ready to welcome you. I assure you, you will be safe and respected." The crowd buzzed in disbelief. A black woman invited to live with a prominent lawyer? It was nothing short of shocking. Naomi hesitated. Doubts still lingered in her heart. She had tasted so-called kindness before, the kind that came with strings attached, with hidden contempt behind the smile. But Jonathan's eyes that day were different, calm, clear, without pity, only recognition, as an equal. She nodded, to the astonishment of everyone. At the farm, Naomi gradually revealed who she truly was. Not only was she resourceful in tending to the workers' health, but she amazed Jonathan with her sharp memory and her ability to analyze documents. Skills honed during her military nursing years, when she had to review every detail of injury records. The more he watched, the more Jonathan believed. Naomi was not just a victim of prejudice. She carried within her a quiet strength, the kind of strength that could change all of Millstone. From the day she set foot on the Reed farm, Naomi began to find a new place for herself. Jonathan not only gave her a roof over her head, but also entrusted her with managing part of his personal library and legal office. Among the shelves packed with files, maps, and court records, Naomi found a strange sense of peace. It felt like being back in a military nurse's station, where every detail could mean the difference between life and death. But one unexpected discovery changed everything. In the old chest Naomi had brought with her was a faded journal belonging to her father, Elijah Carter, a Black War veteran. The pages recounted the post-war years, when the government once issued land grants to black soldiers who had fought bravely. Alongside the journal was a stack of military documents, stamped in red, proving legal ownership of various plots of land around Millstone. Yet, according to her father's trembling handwriting, not a single one of those veterans retained their land. First came the mysterious accidents, then threats and unjust court rulings. Eventually, the land fell into the hands of a group of local businessmen, led by none other than the family of Richard Hale. Naomi sat frozen as she read the shaking lines. The land of her father, of his fellow soldiers, that those who had shed blood for their country had been shamelessly stolen. She began digging deeper into Jonathan's library. Cadastral maps, tax records, property deeds. When placed alongside her father's journal, the full picture emerged. Richard Hale and his allies had built their wealthy empire on the backs of land stolen from black veterans. Jonathan, who had initially given Naomi access to documents just to keep her engaged, now stood silently watching her piece the puzzle together. He realized that before him was not just a nurse, but a living witness, a relentless investigator. Rumors soon spread throughout Millstone. People saw Naomi, a black woman, frequently entering the Reed estate, sifting through legal files, sitting for hours with land maps. The whispers grew nastier, that she was sleeping her way into Reed's protection, that she was plotting to sabotage the town. To Richard Hale, these were not just rumors, they were a threat. Furious, he spread slander, sowing contempt. At tea parties, he even mocked her openly. A poor black woman trying to mess with Millstone's land, we'll show her the consequences. Naomi heard it all, but instead of backing down, she worked even harder in silence. Because now, she understood, the humiliation at the train station had only been the surface. Beneath it was a systemic crime, and if no one dared to face it, that darkness would continue to shroud Millstone for generations. The day of the town council's public hearing arrived. In Millstone was a buzz. People crowded into the large wooden hall, eager to witness the showdown everyone had been whispering about for weeks. In the front row sat Richard Hale, towering with a face full of confidence. He was the first to rise, his voice booming. "We are letting a stranger, a black woman, live off the pity of Attorney Reed, and now she dares to stir up chaos. Naomi Carter is no prestigious nurse. She is a fraud, trying to take advantage of us." A few claps, some cheers echoed from parts of the crowd. Naomi sat still, eyes fixed forward, her arms wrapped tightly around a folder of documents. Then, as the room quieted, she stood. Naomi's voice was not loud, but it was firm, each word ringing through the chamber's four walls. "Mr. Hale is right about one thing. I am a stranger to Millstone. But here is one truth he cannot deny. The land he currently owns never rightfully belonged to his family." The room buzzed with murmurs. Naomi opened the folder, military records, land maps, her father's journal. She pointed to each plot of land originally granted to black veterans after the war, then lost through fraudulent lawsuits and coerced contracts. Jonathan Reed stepped up to assist, pulling certified copies from the state archives. documents that verified every claim Naomi had made. He looked the council straight in the eye. These are not accusations, these are legal facts. Millstone has been built on land that was stolen. The air turned suffocating, murmurs faded into dead silence. Many council members lowered their eyes, avoiding everyone's gaze, and Richard Hale, his face turned pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Naomi stepped forward again. I am not here to demand it all back. I am here to affirm that justice must be restored, not just for my father, but for every person who was stripped of their rights. I propose the creation of the Carter Reed Foundation, a fund for education and healthcare for all Millstone residents, regardless of skin color. The declaration cut through the heavy air like a blade. The crowd began to stir. A few claps, then more, until the entire hall erupted. People were not cheering for Hale's downfall. They were cheering because, for the first time, justice had a voice in Millstone. Richard Hale, once sitting atop power, was now abandoned, isolated amid the thunderous applause. His once proud empire crumbled in a single afternoon. 6 months after that fateful hearing, Millstone had changed. On the very lands once disputed, a new medical center now stood, alongside a small school named in honor of the fallen veterans, all of it funded by the Carter Reed Foundation, a fund Naomi had created using the very documents once buried in darkness. Naomi Carter was no longer the stranger at Millstone Station. She had become a symbol, not through revenge, but by making justice the foundation of unity. At her side, Jonathan Reed continued to work closely with her, expanding the foundation's projects to other towns, sowing hope where prejudice once ruled. As for Richard Hale, he quietly left Millstone in disgrace. His honor shattered, his name remembered only as a cautionary tale. This story ends with a simple truth. Real justice is not about taking from others. It is about building so that all may rise together. And if you want to hear more inspiring stories like this one, be sure to subscribe and join us in finding the flames of justice burning across every corner.